Alrighty, so this week we discussed the idea of language acquisition. So language acquisition is basically defined when you begin to actually deconstruct the word itself. Language is obviously the way that we communicate with one another. Acquisition is the way that we gain the knowledge of communicating with one another. So with that in mind, we would be able to break that down and see it as a way of we would see it as a way of how one would basically learn language. So when it comes to the actual learning of it, a lot of how this actual in actuality, a lot of this class was actually sets up in a way of acquiring language. For example, knowing the for not signifying but associating the different forms of formations with the morphemes and the phonemes and all this type of stuff, the type of words that come out of a certain, the type of sounds that come out of a certain word. With that in mind, it shows how it would show how basically how the sounds and all that would correlate with said words, and then once we put the said words together, that's how we are able to create sentences. With this in mind, there was theories that were attempting to basically define and or categorize this form of acquisition. Um, with this in mind, in 57, then that was the earliest scientific explanation, which was from a psychologist, interestingly, by a Skinner. He was a pioneer behaviorism. With behaviorism, if I recall, no, I'm not even going to attempt. But he basically argued that the way that children would be learning said language was through classical conditioning. So he basically felt that if you were to say, for example, the way that it says here on the website, if you were to say milk, and the mother would smile and give her some milk in result, the baby would then be conditioned that every time he does something well, he will be given a reward for said doing something said correctly. With that in mind, it ends up helping in enhancing the child's language and development. Um, However, as time went on, and Skinner obviously, um, being the earliest, he's going to get a lot of his ideas rebutted, and a lot of his ideas to be challenged, and a lot of his ideas to be opposed. With this in mind, a he was actually criticized by Noam Chomsky, which attempted to say that basically there is a universal language within each and every single one of us. With this in mind, um, he actually argue that there is already a universal type of language to this phenomena. With that in mind, he argued that biology and verbs and nouns in different languages are biologically inherited with us, which is not completely far off, as we tend to point at each other and say us, we, you, me. Um, that type of communication obviously comes from, like, when we were first spawned, not spawned, but when we first attempt to communicate. Um, but another prospect I actually wanted to talk about was conscious learning, which is a form of learning through language acquisition, and is basically stating that if you have an error if you perform an error of some sort and you get corrected for it, you are consciously ingesting the mistake that has been done in front, and therefore will apply that in every single way, in every single method you attempt to use the word denom, because you will have to use it in a much more correct and or conscious way of methodically using it. Um, but to finish off, a lot of everything was very psychological, and the thing that came up to me that came up was the idea of code switching that we actually learned from another unit, in which not it's probably the same unit, but the idea that we are able to switch between languages and all that based upon certain prospects. But yeah,